The old life was gone, buried with the dust of distant planets and the memories of fallen comrades. Lucas Hart had retired from his role as a sniper in Earth's Special Forces nearly a decade ago, trading the life of precision kills and unforgiving terrain for a quiet existence on Titan. New Eden was a haven for those seeking peace in the far reaches of the solar system, and for Lucas, it was his sanctuary, a place where he could rebuild. In the years since his retirement, Lucas had devoted himself to raising his daughter, Emily. She was his entire world, a bright, fearless girl who approached life with wonder. She was 10 now, with his sharp eyes and her mother's tenacious spirit. Together, they lived a simple life on the outskirts of New Eden, far from the noise and chaos that often filled the city's underbelly. They were happy, he thought, and that was enough. But in recent years, rumors of the Syndicate had begun to spread like wildfire through New Eden's narrow streets. The Syndicate was a coalition of alien races, a powerful alliance that had infiltrated nearly every level of society. They had promised order after the fragile intergalactic ceasefire had ended, claiming they would restore stability and enforce peace. But instead, they unleashed a reign of terror. Behind closed doors, they profited from trafficking, weapons sales, and illegal experiments. The Syndicate was a parasite, and New Eden was its host. Lucas had tried to stay out of it. He had promised himself he would leave that life behind. He'd seen what revenge could do, how it eroded a person from the inside out. But fate had other plans. That fateful day began like any other. Lucas had promised Emily he'd be back soon. He just needed to run a quick errand to pick up some supplies in the marketplace. She had been excited to show him the new bot she'd been building from scrap parts. He'd hugged her tightly before he left, a simple gesture he didn't realize would be his last. When he returned, his heart sank. The air was thick with the smell of scorched metal, and smoke billowed from what was left of his home. The entire structure had been reduced to rubble. Lucas's pulse raced as he ran through the debris, frantically searching for any sign of Emily. Neighbors looked on, too afraid to help or even meet his eyes. They had seen what happened to those who got involved with the Syndicate's affairs. "Emily," he shouted, his voice hoarse, echoing through the ruins. He lifted shattered pieces of walls and furniture, desperate to find her, but his search ended when he found her small, lifeless body lying amidst the rubble. He dropped to his knees, the world blurring around him. Emily, his little girl, was gone. The Syndicate had been in the area that day, witnesses whispered, rounding up undesirables and collecting debts. They hadn't spared anyone in their path, not even a child. Over the next few days, Lucas spiraled in grief. His mind replayed every moment, every memory of her laughter, her bright smile, her small hands clutching his as they walked together. He spent sleepless nights trying to understand how the people in charge could allow such cruelty. He went to the authorities, demanding justice, but they dismissed him coldly, citing lack of evidence and warning him against causing trouble. The corruption was deeper than he'd feared. The Syndicate's influence ran to the highest levels. Grief turned to anger, anger to resolve. If the authorities would not bring justice, he would take matters into his own hands. That night, Lucas unearthed the case hidden beneath the floorboards of his ruined home, his old sniper rifle gleaming in the faint light. He hadn't touched it in years, but the weight of the weapon in his hands was a familiar comfort, an extension of his own rage. Sitting in the dim light, he carefully cleaned and calibrated his rifle, fingers moving with the muscle memory of countless battles. He knew this weapon as well as he'd known Emily's small hands. Engraved along the barrel were her initials, EHA, reminder of why he'd left this life, and now, why he was returning to it. He whispered her name, a promise to her memory, a vow of vengeance. Lucas Hart was no longer a father but a hunter, and his prey was every Syndicate member who had allowed this violence to thrive. With a list of names and faces in his mind, Lucas set out into the night. The Syndicate had grown comfortable in New Eden, bold enough to flaunt their wealth and power openly. He would use that arrogance against them. His first target was a syndicate enforcer named Rylan Krax, an alien thug with a reputation for ruthlessness and a history of violent shakedowns. The streets whispered that Krax had been in Lucas's neighborhood the day of Emily's murder. It didn't take Lucas long to find him. Krax frequented a seedy bar in New Eden's industrial district, the Nebula's Edge, a known syndicate haunt. Lucas waited, watching from the shadows as Krax swaggered out of the bar, his hulking form casting a dark shadow under the dim streetlights. Lucas moved with precision, positioning himself on a nearby rooftop, his rifle trained on Krax. The scope brought the enforcer's face into sharp focus. Krax was laughing, oblivious, his grotesque features twisted in amusement as he talked to another syndicate thug. In that moment, Lucas felt nothing but cold determination. He steadied his breath, fingers wrapping around the trigger with practiced ease. "This is for Emily," he whispered as he squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out in the silence of the night. Krax staggered, his laughter cut short as he crumpled to the ground. His companion looked around in panic, shouting into a communicator, but Lucas had already melted into the darkness, leaving the scene as swiftly as he'd arrived. The news of Krax's death spread quickly through the city, and the syndicate's lower ranks were thrown into disarray. Rumors of a ghostly figure-8 human sniper who was targeting syndicate members spread like wildfire. Some dismissed it as a myth, but Lucas knew it was only the beginning. The grief that had once threatened to consume him had transformed into a driving force, a singular mission. Lucas' heart was on the hunt, and he wouldn't stop until every corrupt soul in New Eden had paid for what they'd done. The shadow of the syndicate had loomed over New Eden for too long, but now, the ghosts of their sins had come back to haunt them. And in the dark alleys and neon-lit streets, Lucas moved like a phantom, unrelenting, leaving a trail of justice and vengeance in his wake. The syndicate operated in the shadows, but Lucas knew how to navigate them. The key to his mission wasn't just firepower, it was information. He needed to know the names and faces of those who enabled the syndicate's rule over New Eden and, ultimately, those who had allowed his daughter's death to go unanswered. The list would begin with the enforcers who had terrorized the streets, but it would end with the syndicate's shadowy leaders, especially the alien known as Vex. For weeks, Lucas haunted New Eden's underbelly, moving from one grimy bar to the next, asking questions that few dared answer. His name became whispered among the desperate and the broken, a legend of sorts, a former sniper hunting the city's worst criminals. He traded favors, exchanged threats, and followed every scrap of information that might lead him closer to his daughter's killers. One night, Lucas found himself in the Nebula's Edge again, a dive bar on the edge of the industrial district, where thugs, smugglers, and syndicate affiliates made deals in hushed tones over watered-down drinks. He knew the type well enough. They liked to talk big when they felt safe. And tonight, Lucas was looking for Rylan Krax's associates, who were sure to be lurking nearby. As he scanned the dim room, he noticed a reptilian alien sitting at a corner table, his scaled skin glinting in the low light. This was Targ Mun, another syndicate enforcer known for his persuasive methods. Mun was a low-level thug, but rumor had it he'd been with Krax on Lucas's street the night of the attack. Lucas knew Mun could lead him further up the syndicate chain. He slid into the seat across from Mun, who barely looked up, too absorbed in his drink. Lucas leaned in, his voice low. "Looking for a killer," he said. Mun's eyes flicked up, alarm flashing across his face as he recognized Lucas. But before he could react, Lucas slipped a small pistol under the table, pressing it against Mun's stomach. "Talk," Lucas growled. "Or your body will be floating in New Eden's sewer system before sunrise." Mun swallowed hard, his reptilian eyes darting nervously around the room. You're the ghost, aren't you? The one who took out Krax." "Look, man, I didn't know anything about your daughter. I just followed orders." "Whose orders?" Lucas tightened his grip on the gun. "Higher up than me," Mun stammered. "Krax was collecting dues. Something about setting an example. Orders came from the top brass, but I don't know who exactly." Only Cracks and a few others were in on the details. Lucas's gaze was icy. Names. Sweat beaded on Munn's scaly brow as he whispered a handful of names, syndicate enforcers who had been linked to the recent crackdown on New Eden's outskirts. Some he recognized from his time tracking the syndicate's expansion, others were new to him, and each name added to his growing list. His vengeance would be thorough, there would be no mercy. Satisfied, Lucas released Munn, who scrambled out of the bar, leaving his drink untouched. Lucas knew Munn would probably try to warn the others, but it didn't matter. Fear was as much a weapon as any bullet, and he wanted them to feel it. To know that someone was hunting them, someone they couldn't see or predict. Over the following days, Lucas systematically tracked down each name Munn had provided. The first was an alien named Drake, who ran a syndicate safehouse in a derelict warehouse. Drake was a brute with a reputation for cruelty, known to oversee collections on Titan's lower streets. Lucas waited until nightfall, watching as Drake emerged from the safehouse, flanked by 2 guards. Swiftly and silently, Lucas took out the guards, dropping them with pinpoint precision from a nearby rooftop before approaching Drake. When Drake saw Lucas standing over him, rifle aimed, he dropped to his knees, clawed hands raised in surrender. Lucas hesitated for a moment, considering. Drake could be valuable alive. He might have direct connections to the higher ranks. Please, I was only following orders, Drake stammered, his voice trembling. Who gave the orders to hit my neighborhood? Lucas demanded, his tone sharp. Drake's eyes widened with fear. The orders came down from someone they call the Voice. No one knows his real name, but he coordinates the syndicate's operations in New Eden. He was close to Cracks. Rumor has it he's in charge of enforcing all debts and punishments. It was all Lucas needed to hear. With a curt nod, he pulled the trigger, leaving Drake's lifeless form in the shadows of the warehouse district. He would work his way up from one enforcer to the next, until the Voice was within his sights. As his reputation grew, Lucas became a symbol of terror to the syndicate. He moved swiftly, his rifle a silent reaper. Word of the ghost reached the ranks of corrupt officials, who scrambled to protect themselves, but no one was safe. The syndicate's grip on New Eden began to loosen as enforcers and lieutenants went underground, abandoning their posts in fear of Lucas's wrath. Yet, for every syndicate agent he eliminated, he uncovered more evidence of the group's influence among human officials, aliens, and mercenaries alike. But Lucas was not alone in his fight for long. One night, as he was tracking down another target in a crowded part of New Eden, a slender alien with sharp, silvery eyes appeared in his path. She moved with a fluid grace, her eyes sizing him up as she stepped forward. "You're Lucas Hart," she said quietly. Lucas raised his weapon, not in the mood for introductions. "Who's asking?" The alien held up her hands in a gesture of peace. "My name is Talia. I'm not your enemy. I have information about the syndicate's inner circle." Lucas hesitated, studying her carefully. "Why would you help me?" Talia's expression darkened. "They killed my brother. He was just a scientist, but he was outspoken against their experiments. Vex had him executed as an example." Lucas lowered his weapon slightly, his voice wary. "I don't trust anyone tied to the syndicate." "I was a low-level informant, nothing more," she replied. "They paid me to report on dissenters, but I didn't know. I didn't know the kind of monsters they were." She took a cautious step closer. "I know where the Voice operates. He's the one who ordered the attack that killed your daughter." Lucas's jaw tightened. The Voice had been an elusive figure, always a step ahead, hidden behind layers of syndicate secrecy. But if this stranger was telling the truth, she could be his best shot at finding him. "Fine," Lucas said finally. "We work together. But the moment I think you're lying to me." Talia gave a grim nod. "Understood." With Talia's insider knowledge, Lucas's attacks grew more precise, cutting deep into the syndicate's operations. Talia had access to names, locations, and even the guard rotations of syndicate hideouts. Her information was invaluable, and though Lucas didn't trust her completely, he couldn't deny that she had been an effective ally. Together, they became a formidable team, striking terror into the syndicate. Syndicate thugs whispered about the ghost and his alien accomplice, an unlikely pair leaving a trail of blood across New Eden. Each mission brought Lucas closer to the voice, and every syndicate lieutenant they took down meant one less layer of protection for the elusive leader. But Talia's presence was not without risk. As they delved deeper into the syndicate structure, Lucas grew increasingly aware of the fragile alliance between them. They were both bound by vengeance, but vengeance was a dangerous motivator, one that could lead to betrayal. One night, as they took shelter in a hidden alcove beneath New Eden's neon-lit streets, Lucas glanced at Talia, his tone cold. "You've helped me this far. But if you ever think of turning on me, remember that I'm only doing this for my daughter. I have nothing to lose." Talia met his gaze, a flicker of sadness in her silver eyes. "And I'm doing this for my brother, Lucas. Betraying you would mean betraying him, and I won't do that. But remember, our fight is with the syndicate. Don't let vengeance destroy you." Lucas turned away, gripping his rifle as he stared into the night. He had no intention of stopping, not until every last member of the syndicate had paid for what they had done. And in the darkness, he prepared himself for what lay ahead, the final confrontation with the voice, the man who had orchestrated Emily's death. Lucas and Talia had become a deadly force in New Eden, a relentless storm tearing through the syndicate's ranks. Together, they had dismantled several syndicate strongholds, eliminating corrupt enforcers and cutting off supply lines. Their partnership was effective, and though Lucas's distrust of her lingered, he couldn't deny that Talia had proven to be a valuable ally. She knew the city's labyrinthine underworld, could speak nearly every alien dialect in the sector, and had access to information that Lucas would never have gathered alone. Their attacks began to cripple the syndicate's operations. Panic rippled through the ranks, and whispers about the ghost and his shadowed accomplice, an alien defector, reached the highest levels of the syndicate's leadership. But Lucas had his sights on one target, the voice, the mysterious figure who had ordered the attack on his home, the one directly responsible for Emily's death. One night, Talia approached Lucas with news that the voice would be attending a syndicate meeting in a heavily fortified building at the heart of New Eden. It was a rare opportunity. The voice rarely showed his face, preferring to stay hidden, his orders relayed through intermediaries. But this meeting was different. The syndicate's leadership was in disarray, and the voice would be coming in person to restore order. "This is it, Lucas," Talia said quietly as they looked over the blueprints of the building. "This might be our only chance to take him down." Lucas's gaze was steely as he studied the layout, his mind already formulating a plan. "We go in together, take out any resistance, and end him before he has a chance to escape." But Talia's face held a flicker of doubt. "You know the voice will be heavily guarded, right? The moment we enter that building, every syndicate guard in New Eden will be on us." "Then we'll make it quick," Lucas replied, his voice cold. He looked up at her. "You're not having second thoughts, are you?" Talia shook her head, though Lucas noticed her hesitation. "No. I don't want to see us die for nothing. We're close, Lucas. But if we rush in without a solid plan, we could lose everything." Lucas clenched his jaw, feeling the familiar weight of grief and anger pressing on him. "This isn't about me, Talia. It's about justice for my daughter. If you're not ready for that, then walk away now." Talia's eyes softened, but she gave a small nod, agreeing to his terms. "I'm with you. Let's end this." The night of the operation, Lucas and Talia moved through New Eden's shadowed alleys, their path lit only by the flickering neon signs above them. The building where the meeting was taking place loomed ahead, a stark, metal structure with alien glyphs scrawled across its facade. Guards lined the perimeter, each armed with high-tech weaponry and scanning the area for any sign of intruders. Lucas and Talia slipped in through an underground access tunnel, using Talia's knowledge of the Syndicate's security systems to bypass the cameras. Inside, the building was dimly lit, a maze of sterile corridors and dim rooms. Lucas moved with lethal precision, his rifle trained on every corner as he cleared a path. Talia followed closely, guiding him through the Syndicate's layers of defenses. They encountered guards along the way, but Lucas's skill as a sniper allowed them to move quickly and silently, each target falling without raising an alarm. At last, they reached the meeting chamber, where a handful of high-ranking Syndicate members were gathered around a holographic map, engaged in a heated discussion. And there, standing in the center, was the Voice. He was a tall, imposing alien with angular features and a cold, calculating gaze. His voice was low, his words sharp as he berated the other members for their failures in containing the Ghost's attacks. He was unaware that his worst nightmare was standing just a few meters away, watching him with a lethal determination. Lucas took aim, his finger hovering over the trigger. He could end it right here, a single shot, and the Voice would be dead. But before he could fire, Talia's hand closed over his arm, stopping him. "What are you doing?" Lucas hissed, his voice barely audible. Talia's expression was conflicted, her eyes darting between Lucas and the Voice. "Wait. I need to talk to him." Lucas's stomach dropped, a sickening feeling twisting within him. "Talk to him? What are you saying?" Talia's grip tightened, her voice pleading. "Just give me a minute. There's something I need to understand. Please, Lucas, trust me." But Lucas's patience had worn thin. He shook off her grip, his voice cold. "You want to talk to the man who killed my daughter? After everything, you still need answers?" Talia's face was unreadable, but Lucas could see the guilt flickering in her eyes. "I never told you the whole truth." The Voice. "He has something of mine. I thought I could use you to get to him, but it's more complicated than that." The realization hit Lucas like a punch to the gut. She had been using him, guiding him through Syndicate territory not out of a shared vendetta, but to get closer to the Voice for her own reasons. Rage bubbled up inside him, but he forced himself to remain focused. He couldn't afford distractions, not now. Before he could respond, Talia took a step forward, calling out to the Voice. "Vex." The Voice turned, his eyes narrowing as he recognized her. His lips curled into a smirk, mocking. "Talia. So, you finally came crawling back." Lucas watched as Talia and the Voice exchanged words, their conversation laced with a bitter history that Lucas hadn't known. He realized that Talia's vendetta wasn't just about her brother's death, she had a personal connection to the Voice. And now, she was bartering with him, offering Lucas's location in exchange for a clean slate, a chance to escape from the Syndicate. Betrayal surged through Lucas's veins. He had trusted her, led her into his plans, and now she was using him as a bargaining chip. Rage took over, and without a second thought, he fired a shot, hitting one of the guards beside the Voice. Chaos erupted. Syndicate members scrambled for cover as Lucas charged into the room, firing with deadly precision. Talia backed away, caught between her loyalties and her guilt, while the Voice watched with amusement, a mocking smile on his face. "You're too late, human," the Voice sneered as he dodged Lucas's shots. "You think killing me will bring your daughter back?" But Lucas was beyond words. He advanced with cold fury, taking down the remaining guards until he stood face to face with the Voice, his rifle aimed directly at him. The Voice sneered, unafraid, as if daring Lucas to pull the trigger. But before Lucas could shoot, Talia stepped between them, her hands raised. "Lucas, wait. There's more you don't know. Killing him won't end this. The Syndicate will only replace him with someone worse." Lucas's eyes hardened, his voice low and filled with barely contained anger. "Step aside, Talia. You've done enough." But she didn't move. "Please. We need information from him, information about the Syndicate's leadership." If you kill him now, we lose any chance of bringing the whole organization down. For a moment, Lucas hesitated, torn between his thirst for revenge and the logic of Talia's words. He could kill the voice now and avenge his daughter's death, but Talia was right. The syndicate's influence reached far beyond one man. Killing him here might satisfy his rage, but it wouldn't bring down the whole organization. Reluctantly, Lucas lowered his rifle, his gaze never leaving the voice. Fine. But one wrong move, and you're dead. The voice sneered, clearly unfazed by Lucas's threat. You're making a wise decision. We can come to an arrangement. After all, vengeance is a game we can both play. But Lucas's resolve only hardened. This wasn't over. It was only the beginning. He would take down the voice and anyone else who dared to protect the syndicate. And if Talia tried to stop him again, she'd meet the same fate. As the voice began to speak, offering details about the syndicate's deeper connections, Lucas forced himself to listen. He'd get what he needed from this alien mastermind, and then he'd finish what he started. Because for Lucas Hart, vengeance wasn't just a goal, it was a promise. And he would see it through, no matter the cost. The voice had spoken reluctantly, dripping details about the syndicate's vast network with each word. As he unraveled pieces of their structure, Lucas's fury grew. The syndicate wasn't merely a gang of thugs. It was a complex machine with roots in every level of Titan's infrastructure, stretching from New Eden streets to Earth's wealthiest corporations and powerful alien diplomats. Vex, the voice, was only one link in a sprawling chain of corruption. But the details didn't matter to Lucas. He didn't care about the grand strategy or the bigger picture. His focus was still on vengeance. He would stop the voice from harming anyone else and ensure he never hurt another child like he'd hurt Emily. After extracting every bit of information he could from the voice, Lucas and Talia retreated to an abandoned facility on the city's edge. Tension simmered between them, the air heavy with unspoken accusations and distrust. Talia had revealed her true intentions, and though Lucas felt betrayed, he couldn't deny her help had been invaluable in bringing him this close to the heart of the syndicate's operations. As they hid out in the facility, Lucas studied the blueprints the voice had provided, marking potential entry points to the syndicate's main command center, a fortified compound hidden deep beneath New Eden. This was where Vex operated his central hub of operations, and where they'd find the leaders who ran the syndicate's operations across Titan and beyond. This was the syndicate's brain, the final target, and the last link in Lucas's plan for vengeance. Lucas, Talia said quietly, breaking the silence. When this is over, what will you do? He didn't answer immediately, his gaze fixed on the maps. This doesn't end until every last one of them is gone. She nodded, a flicker of sadness in her eyes. Vex isn't just some petty thug. If you go down there, you might not come back. We both might not. I'm not afraid to die, he replied flatly, his tone devoid of emotion. I already lost everything that mattered. Her hand reached out, resting on his shoulder. You still have a choice, Lucas. You don't have to lose yourself to this. Justice is different from revenge. Lucas shrugged her hand off, his jaw tight. Justice didn't help my daughter. The next night, Lucas and Talia made their way to the syndicate's compound. They moved through the city's maze-like underbelly, avoiding detection as they approached the heavily guarded perimeter. The compound was a towering structure of reinforced steel and alien technology, built to withstand sieges and fortified with cutting-edge surveillance. This was where Vex controlled his network, where he pulled the strings that strangled New Eden. As they drew closer, Lucas reviewed their plan. Talia had managed to bypass part of the security system, opening a brief window that would allow them access to the compound's lower levels. But once inside, they would be on their own, surrounded by Vex elite guards and mercenaries. They slipped through the security breach Talia had created, sneaking into the dimly lit corridors of the compound. The air was cold, sterile, and humming with the sound of machinery. They navigated through the hallways, encountering little resistance at first until they reached the heart of the command center. There, in a massive room filled with screens displaying various operations and communications from across the galaxy, stood Vex. He was flanked by armed guards, his posture relaxed, as if he'd expected them all along. His alien features were sharp, his skin a sickly shade of green that glowed under the fluorescent lights, and his eyes glittered with cruel amusement. Well, Lucas Hart. The ghost of New Eden himself, Vex sneered. And Talia, my dear, I thought I taught you better than to betray your own kind. Talia stiffened, her eyes narrowed. You never taught me anything, Vex. You killed my brother. Vex chuckled darkly, spreading his hands. Your brother was weak, Talia. He was an obstacle to our plans, and you. Well, I always thought you understood that sacrifices had to be made. The words ignited a fire in Lucas. Without hesitation, he raised his rifle and fired, taking down one of Vex's guards with deadly precision. Chaos erupted as Vex's remaining guards lunged toward them, and Lucas moved with the lethal precision of a trained sniper, taking down each guard with swift, ruthless efficiency. But Vex was no ordinary target. He moved with agility, using his advanced alien technology to dodge Lucas's shots. He raised a gauntlet on his wrist, a weapon with an energy shield that absorbed the bullets Lucas fired. Smirking, Vex activated a series of drones that buzzed around the room, their laser sights locking onto Lucas and Talia. Lucas dodged as the drones fired, diving behind a console. Talia moved with equal speed, hacking into a nearby panel to disrupt the drone's targeting system. She shouted over the sounds of gunfire, I can disable his shield, but it'll take a minute. Do it! Lucas shouted, rolling to avoid another blast as he took aim at the remaining guards. He could feel the weight of Emily's memory driving him forward, the pain and rage pushing him through each moment. This was at the culmination of everything he'd fought for. Finally, Talia shouted, Now, Lucas! His shield is down. Lucas sprang up, focusing his sights on Vex, who was exposed, his mocking smile faltering as he realized his shield was no longer active. Vex's gaze met Lucas's, his sneer replaced by fear. He raised his arms in a feigned gesture of surrender, trying one last time to manipulate him. Lucas, Vex said smoothly, his voice oozing with insincerity. Think about what you're doing. I can offer you power, wealth. Whatever you desire. We could be allies. But Lucas's grip on his rifle remained steady, his gaze cold. You took my daughter. There's no bargain that can fix that. And with those words, he pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, striking Vex between the eyes, his lifeless body slumping to the ground. For a moment, silence filled the room, and Lucas allowed himself to breathe, the weight of years of pain and anger finally lifting as he stared at the fallen figure of the man who had taken everything from him. But the silence didn't last. The building's alarms blared to life as the Syndicate's security systems detected the breach. They had only moments before the compound's reinforcements arrived. We have to go. Talia shouted, pulling him toward the exit. Lucas hesitated, staring at Vex's body one last time, the sense of closure mixed with a lingering emptiness. He had done what he came to do, avenged his daughter. But the cost of that revenge, the sacrifices, and the people he had lost along the way weighed heavily on him. He had won, but at what cost? Together, they fled through the compound, fighting their way past the guards and security drones that swarmed the halls. The building began to shake as explosions ripped through the lower levels. Talia had set charges to destroy the command center, ensuring the Syndicate's operations on Titan would be crippled beyond repair. As they reached the exit, Lucas glanced back, watching as the compound was consumed by fire. The Syndicate's grip on New Eden was finally broken. He had fulfilled his promise to Emily, avenging her death and dismantling the organization that had poisoned his city. Outside, the dawn was breaking over Titan, casting a pale glow over New Eden. Lucas stood in the cool morning air, his rifle heavy in his hands, the quiet surrounding him like a shroud. He was free, but he was also alone. Talia stood beside him, watching the rising sun. "It's over," she said quietly. Lucas nodded, though his heart felt hollow. He had avenged his daughter, but the pain of her loss remained. There was no victory, only a dark satisfaction in knowing he had made the syndicate pay for their crimes. "What will you do now?" Talia asked, her tone uncertain. Lucas didn't answer immediately. He had no future left to plan for, no goal left to achieve. He was a man who had lost everything, who had clawed his way through darkness to find justice, and now, standing in the light, he didn't know what came next. "Maybe I'll find a new fight," he said finally, his voice quiet. Talia offered a faint smile. "New Eden could use someone like you. Someone who knows the cost of justice." Lucas looked back at the ruins of the Syndicate's compound, the ashes of the empire he had torn down, and felt the stirrings of something unfamiliar hope. Perhaps, after all the darkness, there was still something worth fighting for. Perhaps he could help rebuild the city he had once only sought to avenge. As he turned to walk back toward New Eden, Lucas left behind the shadow of vengeance that had driven him for so long. He would never forget Emily, but he would honor her memory not by clinging to his rage, but by building something new, something worthy of the love he'd once known. And so, the ghost of New Eden disappeared into the dawn, a man reborn, ready to face whatever battles lay ahead.